As you are reading the various Bible passages and reflecting on them, it is important to consider and remember the genre of that particular passage. A genre is a type of literary composition which has certain elements of form and content. For example, there are some passages or books of the Bible which we might classify as historiography. These are ones that are a record of events, generally about larger groups of people or nations. Generally, they are derived from certain archival accounts, say within a palace. And an example might be much of the material in Kings. In general, poetry is a rather large category. We find poetry in a number of different places. For example, Psalms, parts of prophetic books. And it is important to realize that in poetry, for example, there is much imagery. Things are not necessarily stated outright. Even in Hebrew, the grammar tends to be different. There is song, again, Psalms, but also something like Exodus 15. Again, it has elements of poetry. In Hebrew poetry, you have a lot of parallel lines, which don't necessarily say different things, although the words are different. There is wisdom. Here there are various very short, pithy sayings that are called proverbial wisdom, such as in Proverbs 10 and following. And again, they are very short and to the point. There are other kinds of wisdom passages that are more like reflections, such as Ecclesiastes. And here, especially in a book like Ecclesiastes, the author may be kind of thinking out loud in order to raise questions for which there might not be answers. There are stories of the ancestors, such as in Genesis 12 through 50. These are set down more as a story form, things like character and plot and imagery and pattern are very important to get across what is going on in these sort of behind the scenes. There are letters, for example, in parts of Ezra. Letters which may or may not reflect the whole point of the Bible. These may be simply letters that have been brought into the text to even account for what the enemy is saying. There is prophetic speech, as in the prophetic books. These often are very structured and more poetic. Again, they can use lots of imagery. One of the favorite things that the prophets like to do is have symbolic acts or symbolic references that are being compared to the current time. There are liturgical or ceremonial accounts, for example in 1 Kings 5, the dedication of the temple. There is law, instruction, or Torah, for example in Exodus 21 through 23. There are dreams, such as those found in Genesis and Daniel. There are visions. Visions, you have to be very careful because a lot of this symbols are not meant to be understood as literal. They're trying to get at something that is sort of behind the ordinary world into the heavenly realm, and thus they are very sharp and very puzzling at times. Some of these can be found in Ezekiel. And there are parables such as Nathan telling the story to David after David sleeps with Bathsheba. So keep all of these in mind. Remember what you are reading. This is especially important because the literal meaning of a text might be very different in historiography and in a vision. You may not want to, in a vision, interpret things quite literally. I want to say a word about historiography. Now, in the modern times since the Enlightenment, history is based upon how do we know things, and there's a great concern to only write things that we can know, and know by demonstration, by evidence, etc. And this is a shift in the modern age, the late 18th and 19th centuries. And in this period, philosophy, which had been during the Middle Ages the highest form of learning, the physical sciences become the foundational method, and this is huge. This is a huge shift. There is also an assumption of inevitable progress, so that tradition should no longer guide actions in the present or ground hope for the future. In the Enlightenment, it was thought that the past was mainly characterized by folly and superstition. And of course, we in the modern period are better, we know better. There can also be a concern for reconstructing the past with no practical interest in how the reconstructions might be used. In other words, the idea or the ideal in historiography is to sort of divorce oneself from any involvement, to be objective, to simply put down an account of what happened based on evidence with no particular dedication to what that might be. The focus is on general, predictable phenomena or forces in history rather than on the unique and the idiosyncratic. And sources are considered only usable or reliable if, one, they are externally verified, they are non-ideological, the events are probable, that is, they generally occur and are predictable, and they are non-literary. In other words, a laundry list is far preferable if you are doing modern historiography. This can explain why in many scholarly works they will talk about or cast doubt upon things being historical that are written down in the Bible. This happens because there are many things, say the stories of Abraham, which cannot be externally verified. There are no external records that one can check. Also, the Bible tends to have a particular point of view, a particular theology, a particular commitment to what the truth is. And also, the talking about miraculous events or God's intervening in history cannot be measured as probable. They are not generally occurring and predictable from the point of view of the historian. And also, the Bible is a literary document. These are not, documents that have been found in a garbage pile, ancient garbage pile, that might have letters, that might have accounts, that might have everyday kinds of documents that have no commitment to any kind of truth. So just keep this in mind when you are reading external literature, because the ancient, medieval, and Renaissance approach to historiography was very different. First of all, there is an importance of tradition as the framework. And history was the story of the contingent and the particular. History actually, the study of history actually had little place in education. Philosophy was valued as studying what was of eternal value. History was not much respected during those periods. And often accounts in the past were designed to delight the reader and teach morals through examples. In other words, there was not really the desire to simply put down what could be quantified, but rather to sort of reach the reader at a different level, at the moral level, at the level of delight. C.S. Lewis has also pointed out in his book, The Discarded Image, that the medieval period at least, and this could have been, probably was not true of the biblical period, but was certain true of much of church history, that the medievals were overwhelmingly bookish, and they gave great authority to manuscripts from the past. Traditional cultures, and that is what we see in the Bible, depended upon the stories, the traditions told by family, clan, and tribe, since those are what strengthened community solidarity. So there was just a very different approach to recording what went on in the world.